Good evening. And just so you know, I didn't lose an earring. I'm going through a midlife crisis. It's lovely though, isn't it? And it's orange. So, let's prepare the space and ourselves this evening. I ask that you exercise your meditation or your own centering practice. You may close or lower your eyes, or simply find other methods to achieve stillness once you receive your instructions from me. So take in a deep, cleansing breath through your nose and exhale through your mouth as you lower or close your eyes. Once again, breathe in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And once again, and after your third inhale, breathe out whatever distraction of the day you encountered and bring to us your full attention, wisdom, and curiosity. As you resume your normal breath, remember and give honor to the person or persons who influenced you to fight for justice, to help those who may not be able to help themselves in the moment. Or was it an event or a circumstance that moved you to take action against injustice? Who or what brought you into this room today? Take a few precious moments of silence and acknowledge that contribution to your life. Now take in one last deep cleansing breath. Exhale, swallow, and slowly open your eyes. Good evening. Good evening to family and friends and colleagues and neighbors, and welcome to the YWCA Princeton's 11th annual Stand Against Racism. This is a continuation of the YWCA's ongoing commitment to the elimination of racism wherever it exists and by any means necessary. Taking a stand against racism is not a slogan or a yearly event. It is a movement for real and sustainable change. It is a movement that aligns our collective power and wisdom so that we remain focused on the mission and mindful of the ever-present detours and distractions before us along the way. I view tonight's Thought-Provoking Talks as a gift to us from four brilliant and accomplished women. Mercer County Community College President Dr. Jianping Wang, author and playwright Noemi de la Puente, Rider University Professor Dr. Evelyn McDowell, and Princeton Community Historian Mrs. Shirley Satterfield. I'll note that no one clapped for me, but that's okay. I'm okay. Tonight's Thought-Provoking Talks will analyze the personal, institutional, and cultural manifestations of racism with attention to historical and contemporary racism in the United States. Following the talks, Dr. David Kemp, expert on civic engagement, social inclusion, and audience response systems, did I get that right, Jimmy? Thank you very much. Will conduct the first of 2 audience participation polls. We will then take a short break to allow time for you to comfortably move to the location of your breakout discussion group. More on that process a bit later. After 1 hour, we will reconvene back here for report outs of the discussion. David will again poll the audience, and we will then bring the evening to a close at 9 p.m. Throughout the evening, YWCA trustees, volunteers, and staff stand ready to assist you in locating the restrooms and to answer other logistical questions. They are led by event ambassadors and YWCA Princeton trustees, Betty Garbar and Maria Armington. Rise so folks know who you are. Thank you. I now call to the stage a woman who lives and breathes the YWCA mission of empowering women and eliminating racism, and who is really loud about it, and her role as a white ally. I've known Judy for over 35 years, and we have stood together in the struggle. My friend, Judy Hutton, YWCA CEO of Princeton.
It's hard to believe that 11 years ago, the YWCA of Trenton and Princeton got together and said, let's have a one-day event. Let's call it the Stand Against Racism. And let's just see, do people feel racism still exists? And to think now that nationally, 11 years later, it's turned to our YWCA USA into a national movement with 442 events taking place this weekend all around our country. And they're signing and saying the same pledge. I will commit to a lifetime of promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all people in my community and in the world. And they're saying, I will commit to a lifetime of promoting it, not just a day, not just a year. We are committed to waking up every day to fight racism. And we could not do it without our partners. Many of you in the room, and we have partners all year through that continue with this movement. And I'm reminded of a quote from Mother Teresa. She was so cute, wasn't she? You can do things I cannot. I can do things you cannot. Together, we can do great things. Thank you.
Brilliant, Judy. Thank you. The Fair and Welcoming Coalition of Mercer County works to support the undocumented community in Ewing and Mercer County and is a Stand Against Racism partner organization. Activist, artist, photographer, educator, entrepreneur, Fatima, does not have the H, Muggle, is a leader in that movement and represents the coalition tonight. Fatima is active in many local grassroots groups, including Ewing People Power, the Central Jersey Coalition for Justice, and volunteers with the Latin American Legal Defense and Education Fund in Trenton, and assists newly resettled refugees in Camden. Fatima, come to the stage.
Coalition of Mercer County and some of the work that we're doing in hopes that we can maybe recruit some more members of the coalition. We're working on a lot of different things. We're just a coalition of groups within Mercer County that have been working in Ewing, Princeton, Lawrenceville, West Windsor, Hamilton, Trenton. So we just kind of been working in our own communities and then came together to build a coalition to try to work on the county level. And as Sandy said, we're working to support the local undocumented community and really put some protections in place because we know what's happening at the federal level and it's terrifying. And so we as a community are trying to come together and say, what can we do? What protections can we put into place on the local level to at least, combat this a little bit in any way that we can. So it's been very slow but steady. We are hitting a lot of roadblocks, but we are persistent. We have Adriana from LawDef, who's in the room with us here today. She's one of our just mentors, advisors. She's been really guiding us on what we've been working on, along with a few other immigrant advocacy groups as well. So we're YWCA. You can come and see me if you'd like to find out how you can help and what you can do. We are, like I said, a coalition of smaller groups, but we also welcome individuals as well who live in Mercer and want to do something to help. So there's a lot of different ways you can help. Some smaller, just showing up. We need bodies in the room sometimes just to let people know that we're representing a large community, and sometimes it's having meetings with freeholders or with people from the sheriff's office or the county prosecutor's office. So there's lots of levels of participation, and we love to have you. So thank you.
Yes. It's just amazing. The Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church is another partner in the Stand Against Racism. Karen Delt, Princeton YW board member and founder and president of Davis and Delt Management Consulting and Executive Coaching Firm, now brings her greetings.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church is proud to partner with the Princeton YWCA on Thought-Provoking Talks and a Stand Against Racism. Witherspoon Street Church has been located in Princeton at its present location since 1838 and has had consecutive Sunday services since then. Obviously, we've had some snow out days. But you think about that, that is really something. And definitely, we take a stand against racism and have been the voice of the voiceless in the community. And it's part of what is our founding. And we're very proud of that, as we are of William Drew Robeson, who was our pastor for 21 years, and the father of Paul Robeson, which is what this street is named after. And also the Arts Council has his bust. So if you know anything about Paul Robeson, he got his foundation from his father, and his father had a tremendous influence on our church and this community. So we're proud to partner with the Y.
Thank you. Dr. Shirley Rendleman serves as CEO of Omar Consulting Group, an ophthalmology consulting practice that specializes in creating business and clinical development know-how for companies with interest in eye diseases. She is a member of several national and international scientific boards, and along with her unwavering commitment to social and economic justice, she is committed to empowering women through scientific and medical literacy. I call to the stage Dr. Shirley Rendleman, President, Board of Directors, YWCA Princeton, and Racial Justice Visionary.
I can't tell you how happy I am to see this room full the way it is today. Thank you all for coming. I just want to spend 90 seconds of your time and talk to you a little bit about the theme of today's Stand Against Racism. The theme being our power, our future, and our mission. So ask yourselves, is anything different now and 11 years ago when the stand was started by the Princeton YWCA and the Trenton YWCA back in 2007? Well, I looked this up in Wikipedia because, as you know, Wikipedia is the definitive source of all knowledge in the year 2018. Well, number 43, George W. Bush was America's 43rd president. He was elected in 2001 and re-elected in 2005. And it was the second time in American history that a president's son had been sent to the White House. The first was John Quincy Adams. He was the son of John Adams. And John Quincy was elected the 6th president of the United States. His father was number 2. In September of 2001, number 43's presidency was transformed when people from another country used an airplane to terrorize the American people on September the 11th. Although the country was altered forever, it united against these attacks and fought hard to heal the wound created by an act of war committed less than 50 miles away from here. But still, an ideological divide was happening, and the issue of racial inequality as a lived experience remained unaltered, and might as well, in fact, be judged by recent events here in our area as getting worse in this country. In 2008, number 44 was elected, and he and his beautiful wife, Michelle, changed the face of American politics forever. And we had an open discussion with the American people about race and moral competency. And yet, at the end of that era, in 2016, the Pew Research Foundation released a report on the state of race relations in America. In light of politics both here and abroad, it's a reminder why, as an organization, the YWCA remains relevant and exists to eliminate racism. In that report, 88% of blacks say that the country needs to continue making changes to have equal rights with whites. But 43% were skeptical that these changes would ever be made. 53% of whites say the country still has work to do in order for blacks to achieve equal rights with whites. While yet again, another 40% believe that the country won't ever make any of these changes. In 2016, we elected number 45, who aspires to make America great again. As we sit in this place, we will be remembered for what we say and do. The stand thrusts our collective power forward so that we can have equal access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness now and in the future. This stand and our mission continue to remain relevant, and it's necessary for activism in this community. I want to thank you very much for coming this evening. I'm looking forward to the next 4 talks. I'm looking forward to the discussions that you're all going to have. This is the first time we've ever done a stand quite like this, so I want to thank you very much for supporting the YWCA.
Now, the reason you're here. Dr. Jianping Wang, a native Chinese, holds a doctorate in educational leadership and a master's degree in English literature. She is currently serving as the 6th president of Mercer County Community College in West Windsor, New Jersey. Dr. Wang is the recipient of the Dynamic Achiever in Education Award from the Organization of Chinese Americans, is a Kellogg Research Fellow, and most recently, the winner of the New Jersey Immigrant Entrepreneur Award. Dr. Wang served on the transition team on education for Governor Murphy and currently serves as the chair of the Blue Ribbon Commission of Mercer County Education Attainment and on the National Community College Advisory Council for ETS. She also served as the president of the board of directors for the National Asian and Pacific Islanders Council of the American Association of Community Colleges. Dr. Wang is devoted to promoting cross-cultural exchange and understanding and enjoys presenting to various community organizations to promote the mission of community colleges and the power of education. Dr. Wang's talk is titled, Act What You Believe. Dr. Wang.
Yes. Good evening. Good evening. I am so awfully delighted to be here with you tonight on particularly a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. As I stand in front of you, you can easily guess I wasn't born and raised here. No surprise there. But I also want to let you know it's awfully great for us to all gather together like this, do a great event like this to combat against racism. I'm here actually to do something different. I want to remind all of us, you don't have to wait for an event like that to fight against racism. You don't need a title like mine as the president of a college to do something like that. If you believe racism is wrong, it's unconstitutional, it's inhumane, then you can act on it each and every day. And I also wanted to point out, racism is not an American thing. It's everywhere. It's around the world. And I'm going to share with you some of my personal experience to prove my point. Needless to say, I was born in China, but you may not notice that I was a girl. Huh? Born, and I'm not afraid to reveal my age, born in 1958. In 2 weeks, I'll be 50 years old. I'm 60 years old. I'm sorry. 60 years old. I'm still thinking I'm 50, right? My math sucks, that's why. Good thing I'm a liberal arts person, right? I'm not teaching math, that's good. So, when I was born, I was the first child to my parents. My mother, because she gave birth to me, was forever and ever a bad girl in my grandparents' eyes, because you didn't give birth to a boy. So she was given a second chance to give birth to a boy. 2 years later, she gave birth to yet another girl. What happened to that girl? My grandmother came to the hospital, took my sister away, and gave her up. My mother never saw her own daughter. So, growing up in a culture like that forever reminds you that you as a girl had to fight for everything, not just a job, a school or something, even eating food. People ask me, egg white, egg yolk, which one you like? Better. looking at my brother, he had to choose first. And he said he liked egg white. So I only said, I like egg yolk. Why? Because he will always have his first choice no matter what. Because he was a boy. So I grew up in an environment where my parents had plans for my brother to go to college, to get a great job, to be somewhere else. But I had a plan for me to finish my high school and work in a factory across the street from the house where they live, and get married next door and raise my children while taking care of them. That was my plan. That was the plan that my parents made for me. Not because what I was interested or what my abilities might be, but because I was born a girl in a culture where girls were deemed to be less valuable and therefore less capable than boys. I'm happy to report my brother never went to college. He's living next door to my parents because I moved my parents next door to him. And I'm here. And I did it not because there are events like that in China at that time, because I felt it was wrong. Why I couldn't go to college? So when the playing field was even in 1976, everybody could go take a test and see if you're good for college materials. I took my test. Unfortunately, I was too nervous to remember my own name, so I forgot my name. And I didn't write it on the test. So I had to retake the test the following year. But I did okay. I went to college. However, my parents told me you couldn't go far. So I had to go to the local college. Because I went to the local college, when it's time for me to consider a graduate school, happened to be the best in China, I showed up after the test, and everyone in the classroom asked me, how did I get there? They want to know who my father is or who my mother was. And I told them, my father is a factory worker, my mother is a textile worker, and they're back at home. Why? And they're saying, how did you get here? I said, I took the test. That's how I got here. And I was the first one to graduate in my class because it's a master's degree, 3-year program. It was the highest degree achievable at Beijing University in 1983. So I was the first female from my city to go to Beijing University for the master's degree. And when I finished the program, I was on top of the class. I was assigned to join the faculty. And I won the award, the Teacher of the Year, and I get an apartment in the professor's building. And I was young. So every time I opened the door, the bill collector for water bill, for electricity bill, they always ask me, where's your father? Where's your mother? And I'm like, my father, back home. Where's your mother? Back home with my father. And they say, well, who lives here? I am. No, not you. Not you. Who owns this apartment? I said, I am. They said, that's not possible. I said, do you want to see the paper? And I showed them a paper. And they said, oh, that's strange. Because you're supposed to be 60, 70, 80 years old to be a professor, to live in the professor's building. And I was way too young for that. So the discrimination, the stereotyping, the prejudices are everywhere. In every shape, every color, every size, in every day. So I came fast forward to the United States. I got a job to be a dean in New York. I moved to New York, and I tried to buy a condo. My bank approved my loan. The condo association declined me. So I called up and I said, why? If the bank said, we think you can pay for it, what's the problem? They say, we don't know. But I found out they thought I was a secretary in the college, and how could I afford to live there? So I told them, if I don't get the approval next Friday, I'm suing you. So of course I got in, and then they want me to join the board. And I said no. So then I became the president, came here in this county, went to my first president's meeting, and I parked my car. I'm lost. I don't know which door to go in. I'm looking, and there is a president, and I'm not going to name that person. They looked at me and say, "What are you trying to do?" And I said, "I'm trying to go to that room." He said, "No, that's for President's Council meeting. And where are you trying to go?" I said, "That's the meeting I'm going." And the reason I give you that example is because I am one of the two Chinese, native Chinese, who are serving as college presidents in the state of the United States. And one is Seattle, the other coast, and I'm on this side.
Wow.
And I'm saying all this to say that this racism comes in all sizes, in all shapes, in all colors, throughout your life. And you do not have to wait for an occasion like this to say, I am against racism and I'm going to do A, B, C, D. You can do it each and every day, and you should, because you have a lot of opportunities to stand up, do what's right. It's not just constitutionally it's right, it's a human right to discriminate people based on their race, their gender, their color of skin, or whatever it is. It's inhumane. You are suffocating a human potential because of your own ignorance. And so I hope each and every one of us have friends, and tell our friends that if we band together and we do it each and every day on every occasion, we can do it, we will win.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you so much. Author and playwright, Noemi de la Puente. Noemi received her MFA in Theater Arts from the University of Iowa, her master's degree from Princeton University, and her bachelor's from Caltech. Noemi is a member of the Dramatists Guild, and her plays include Generic Hispanic, Manuel versus the Statue of Liberty, The Revenge of Suicide Jack, and Lightning Strikes Twice, which is a 10-minute musical produced in English in New York and in Spanish in Caracas, Venezuela. Upcoming works include the Pet Play about pets and their obsessive owners, due out in June 2018. Noemi is founding member of Dramatic Question Theater, a collective of playwrights that develop multicultural works and challenge the traditional race, gender barrier of professional playwriting as practiced in America today. Noemi's talk is titled, Manuel versus the Statue of Liberty, Writing and Producing as Ways of Using Your Voice for Change.
Yay.
So we're having some technical issues. Would you like the mic down there? Yes, I would. I also I have a copy of my presentation on a flash drive.
YWCA, our musical starts out very bad for the undocumented immigrants. I'm collaborating with composer David Davila on this piece. In 2015, we presented this show at the New York Musical Theater Festival. We won the special award for social relevance and impact. We were nominated for Best Musical, and our Statue of Liberty took home an Outstanding Individual Performance Award. So here you'll see a picture of us accepting the award and some production photos. Yes, we turned the entire United States immigration system into a boxing ring where the undocumented have to fight the Statue of Liberty. Yeah. So armed with these accolades, we rushed off into the professional theater world and we thought, wow, everybody is going to love our show and everybody's going to want to produce it because it's edgy, it's funny, it's political, it has to be done now, it's so relevant. And theater people would be the perfect people to do this because they're open-minded, they're artistic, they're liberal, they're progressive, right? Not so much, according to a study called The Count, which kind of inventoried all of the professional productions in off-Broadway and in regional theater. So I call these the circles of exclusion. The Count basically collected data on all of the playwrights who received professional productions in 2015, and it subdivided the playwrights by demographic characteristics. So the top circle is just unique writers by gender. And you can see that men got almost 80% of the productions, and women got 20% of the productions. Unique writers by race. White writers got almost 90% of the productions, and writers of color got a little over 10%. So my question to you is, how is it that an industry that is comprised of largely unbiased, open-minded individuals can function in such, collectively in such a closed-minded, exclusive manner? I don't know. But I can tell you, as we look at the data further and plow deeper into these demographic differences, you can see that gender makes a big difference. The blue circle at the top is American white men. They get 62.7% of the productions. White women, all of a sudden you just change the gender and it, boom, drops to 14%. Let's go to American men of color, 6%. American women of color, 3.4%. So if I just changed my name to Juan, I would almost double my chances of getting produced. The Broadway League, now I'm going to jump from plays to musicals. The Broadway League looked at their audiences, and they saw that their audiences are 68% female and 80% Caucasian. That is not diverse, nor is that entirely male either. Now, the number one reason that I hear most often about why theaters will not produce works by women is, they're not going to do it well at the box office, our subscribers won't like it. So I thought, why don't I look at the riskiest, most expensive form of theater and see if that's true or not. So I looked at Broadway musicals, and I found that 4 out of the top 10 grossing Broadway musicals of all time either had women in key creative decision-making positions or were female-centric stories with lots of female characters. So go ahead. So the number one grossing musical of all time is The Flyin King. It's an African-inspired musical. It's directed by Julie Taymor, who is a visionary in the theater. She won a MacArthur Genius Grant. And one of the 2 book writers is Irene Mecchi, who is obviously a woman. And then, of course, just for the cherry on top, is directed by a man of color, Garth Fagan, who works in the UK, but he's from Jamaica. The number 2 top grossing musical of all time is Wicked. It is the prequel to The Wizard of Oz. It is the female buddy musical between Glinda the Good Witch and Elphaba, who ends up being regarded as the Bad Witch. Book writer Winnie Holtzman collaborated with composer, lyricist Stephen Schwartz on this. The number 4 top grossing musical of all time is Mamma Mia. The music is by pop group, that Swedish pop group ABBA, and book writer Katherine Johnson crafted a story about a mother of the bride who's hosting a wedding, and she invites the 3 potential fathers of the bride to be there. So obviously Mom had a lot of fun in her youth. And there are great roles for older women and younger women in this musical. The number 5 top grossing musical of all time is Chicago, the 1996 revival. And yes, that is Princeton's very own B.B. Newirth at the front. So this musical was written by men, Fred Kander and John Ebb, but it is almost an entirely female-centric plot, and the cast is almost entirely female. Now, I'm going to introduce to you a little musical. It's actually the 11th. It's just outside the top 10, but it is the 11th top grossing musical of all time, and it came out about 2.5 years ago. Can anybody guess what it is?
Hamilton.
Hamilton, yes, Hamilton. That is the number 11 grossing musical of all time. And I bring this up because it is written by Puerto Rican American Lin-Manuel Miranda. It is the story of Alexander Hamilton and the Founding Fathers. The broader gesture in this piece is that it took all these white male roles, our Founding Fathers, and it cast them all with people of color, kind of grafting the new modern American face onto the more traditional American face. And my only teeny tiny criticism in that piece is that there are very few female roles in the show. They're all really good roles, but there are few. And I have heard in interviews that the creative team would consider non-traditional casting in a gender way for some of for the roles as they create touring companies. And I point this musical out because it is 2.5 years old. The other musicals have decades on Broadway, and I believe that this musical is the harbinger of the future. It points to the fact that audiences are really, really hungry for diversity and variety on stage. So what do you do if you're not Broadway level? Let's say you're just starting out. You have to produce your own shows. Yes, you do. And especially as women of color, we saw those statistics. They're not going to come beating a path to our doors, right? So write a story you are passionate about. You're going to be with this story for a long time. Rewrite it. Get it in front of people. Give your scripts to others to read and give you feedback. Incorporate the feedback. Take the critique. Rewrite. Get it up in front of people in any way, shape, or form. In a reading. I don't care if the reading is in your living room. If you want to do it, you've got to start somewhere, so do it. Then you put on your, there we go. Then you put on the business person hat and you raise money to do your show. You do a little fundraising math. Fundraising math is pretty simple. You get the number of friends you have times the amount of money you think they will give you. If you have 100 Facebook friends and they're each going to give you $25, then your budget is $2,500. If you have a rich aunt who's going to give you $5,000, then your budget is $5,000. You make a budget, like a glorious budget because you want to dream big, and a Spartan budget just in case that aunt changes her mind. There's, I could go on and on about crowdfunding versus just individually asking people for money. Keep it simple, just ask people for money. And that's a whole other talk. And then in-kind gifts. That's a fancy way of saying free stuff. Who can give you rehearsal space? Who might have costumes that you need? Who might have free photocopying and printing? Those things are valuable. Audiences, you have a role to play also. Go see more shows by women and people of color. You know that we vote with our dollars and our feet, and in the theater we vote with our butt in the seat. So go see shows, take risks with smaller venues, go see shows by people who are not like you, about people who are not like you, in milieux that you are unfamiliar with. You will learn that we have so much more in common than we do different. It's a beautiful art form to explore other cultures. So I'll leave you with this quote by Stella Adler. Theater was created to tell the truth about life and the social situation. If you don't know who Stella Adler is, she is one of the co-founders of the American Method Acting. She's a giant in the American theater. So I think that working together, we can get that little orange star, 3.4%, up to that blue circle, 62.7%, where it belongs. Thank you.
Thank you, Noemi. Everybody just stand up for a moment. Just stand up. Squeeze, unsqueeze. Squeeze, unsqueeze. Better?
Oh, yeah.
Better? Okay, now sit in. Yes. I know this was supposed to be dignified, I'm sorry. I really am. Dr. Evelyn McDowell is an associate professor of accounting at Rider University in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. She is co-founder, charter member, and president of Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage. Dr. McDowell is a member of the Princeton chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Currently, she is researching diversity in the accounting profession and the effect of slavery on tax policy and reporting. Dr. McDowell's talk is titled, "We Have More in Common, Connecting with Enslaved Ancestors, the Effects of Slavery on Race and Empowerment." Doctor?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I want to thank you all for coming out, and I'm so honored to be on the stage with such wonderful women who are just doing amazing things, and I'm very honored. All right, so I want to first tell you about my story. My topic is about the using your. My topic's about using your looking at American history through the lens of your genealogy. So I'm going to give you a lot of information. I'm going to try to go through it very quickly. Okay, and you can go to the next one. Okay, go before that. Okay, what? No, before. Okay, there you go. You stay there for a minute. Okay. I have a very vivid memory when I was a child. And that memory was a terrifying memory. I was in, I remember the neighborhood where I was living was ablaze. My mother and father were just terrified. Across the street was burning. The neighborhood store was burning. And I didn't know what was going on. It turns out that I was living through what they call the Huff Riots. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and the Huff Riots was right in the mid-'60s, and it was a very terrifying event for me. I didn't think I would live past it, actually. Every time, when I turned, I said, I don't think I'm going to make it to 16. I mean, it was that traumatic. But I always wondered, why is it, I didn't know until much later why, or what was going on, of course, because I was a very young child. But even at that age, I knew that there was something different about me and other people. I knew that, I looked at TV and I saw these white families, and they were doing great. But in my neighborhood, I saw people in despair. I saw people crying and yelling, and people didn't have enough to eat. I remember going to bed myself, hungry. And so, but I look at TV and I see this, and I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? So what I determined what it was is that being black was bad, and being white was good. And even at that young age, I wanted to be white. I wanted to have long hair. I wanted to have white skin. Why wouldn't I? I mean, because on TV, being white was great, and being black was not so great. So I didn't know until, actually I struggled with that until I went to college. And when I went to college, it was the first time I was around white people. You know, white people, as far as I knew, you know, maybe they had something magic. Because why was it that I saw that? And when I went around and I talked to other white people that were there, I said, hey, you guys are just like us. You know, we're all human. You know, I was just as smart as many of them, and I was, you know, maybe smarter. I'm sure I was smarter than quite a few that was on my campus. And in my neighborhood, they weren't, you know, we were all the same. We're just human beings, you know. So that left me wondering, okay then, why do black people have so little and white people have so much? And so I wanted to find out that answer. And so it wasn't until I started doing my own work with my own family genealogy, family history, that I started to see a whole nother story, as my mother would say, from the South. I found out, first I started with my parents, and that's what you should do if you want to do your own family history. I started with my father, and he died, and my mother died when I was a young woman, so I didn't get a chance to get all those stories. And if your mother and father's alive, talk to them now, because you just never know what's going to happen. But my father was a Marine. He was in the Marine Corps. He was in the first segregated Marine Corps that they had in World War II. I was like, wow, this is awesome, Dad. But he went, you know, so I was wondering, okay, from that point, you know, my father was from Alabama, my mother was from Georgia. So so at this point I'm wondering, you know, how did they get to Cleveland? I mean, what happened? So what I found out is that they were, you know, brought up through the Great Migration. And through the Great Migration, they landed in Cleveland, Ohio, and in Cleveland, Ohio, you can see the red line. How many people in here know what redlining is? Okay, wow, this is a great group. Okay, so there is Huff right there, and redlining, of course, is what happened when the government decided that they don't deserve to be invested in this neighborhood. However, the investment went, lots of money, billions of dollars, went into towns like Levittown, and those places to live. But we were shuttled into this neighborhood where there was despair. There was no investment, and the houses were going down. Then I was wondering, well, how did my parents get? I mean, you know, where did the southern parts of my parents, where they came from? How did they get there? And what happened? And then so it led me to slavery. So now I had to learn more about slavery. I didn't learn a whole lot in school. According to the Poverty Law Center, not many of you all learned a lot about slavery as well. So I had to learn that it started in 1619. The 400-year commemoration is coming up next year. And it lasted for 246 years. I had no idea until I started my research. And race was just made up to justify what they were doing to the people from Africa. And so I learned that over 4 to 6 million people at the height of slavery, which was the end of 1860. There were 4 million people at that particular point, 4 million people that were enslaved. But we don't know the real number. There are a number of enslaved people who were not enumerated on the census. George Washington, who knew, had 319 enslaved people when he died. And many of our presidents did. The U.S. economy was based on slavery. So much of it was based on slavery. It made us a super world power. The money that was made with industries in the cotton industry. And it's not just the South. A lot of the northern companies as well made a lot of money on slavery. And I also also learned that the Civil War was all 100% fought because of they wanted to enslave my ancestors, and maybe me if they had lost. They wanted Negro slavery forever, okay? And if they had won, I'm sure probably not going to be a doctor and have my PhD, a CPA, and all the other stuff I have. Okay. So I've been working. I found 37. I have 37 direct ancestors who were enslaved, and you can see some of them listed here. And if you go on to the next one, okay. And this is I found my second great grandmother listed here as an enslaved woman, and she's listed here for $350. Right up above, she's property on a will, and she's right up above the hogs and furniture. I cannot tell you how that made me feel to see that document. I mean, there are no words in the human language to describe it. Absolutely, you can't describe it. Okay. I also found the first evidence of the first migration. So the first migration is when there were the African Americans were in the middle parts of the country, and then during the height of the cotton industry, when it boomed, they sold all of those individuals, or many of them, down the river, as they say. And this is evidence of that in my own family tree. I found that my second great grandfather indicated on the 1880 census that his mother and father were born in Virginia. So that meant his parents were sold down the river. And so I'm still working on my tree, and the next is to find those two people. Okay. This is also evidence of my second great grandfather, another second great grandfather, and he is listed here as a freedman. He is just coming out of slavery, and he's being bound out to a man who owned people previously. So they just went into another form of bondage, as what happened to him. And this is my same second great grandfather. He is registering the vote at the end of slavery. And here he is listed there as a colored man, and up above there were white people. And so he's listed there, but then we find out in a few years later, they would disenfranchise them and take away their right to vote. And it's still going on today. Okay. This is a picture that I found. I did not find this until later, but this is one of my cousins. This is a first cousin, and she was on the Freedom Rider. She was a Freedom Rider. I'm like, wow, look at that. And I just love her smile as she is being booked in Mississippi. And, I wouldn't be smiling in Mississippi as that, but here she is smiling. And I love this picture. So what I found out after going through all of my research, this is what I come up to see. That in the United States, your ancestry, the color of your skin, and government resources that empower you leads to you living in a great neighborhood. If you live in a great neighborhood, there's a great chance that you're going to go to great schools, great public schools. And if you go to great public schools, you're probably going to go to a wonderful college. And you're going to meet influential people. And that's really important. You know how people say it's not what you know, it's who you know? That is so true, okay? But in accounting, you have to know people and know your work, only in accounting. But you have you're going to have great educational opportunities. You're going to know influential people. And that means a lot. Then that leads to great job opportunities where you can build wealth and privilege. And then that continues on. You're building on top of building on top. But for African Americans, we're flat, okay? And the chances of us moving up like this is unlikely given those, those three things that I was telling you about. Your zip code tells you so much about what's going to happen to you. And until we live in a society where people are born And it doesn't matter where your zip code is. We're not there yet, and we're just not there at all. And that's what I see happening. So now I understand why I was that little 2-year-old, I mean, I wasn't 2, but when I was a young child going through this terrible time, the Huff riots. I understand it now. I understand how my parents got there. I understand, it wasn't their fault. I understand that that the United States, our government, played a big part in that, and I understand that we are still okay with it, because we haven't done anything to really change it, okay, which is not a good thing. And so this is what I learned. It had nothing to do with skin color, but it had everything to do with skin color. I am president of Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage, and I just want to invite you all to our conference on June 2nd. And we uplift our ancestors. We uplift the enslaved ancestors. We have programs there that help you do this kind of work, where you will connect to your enslaved ancestors. We uplift them, and we talk about them, and we say their names. And it's an uplifting experience. The whole thing is great. And I just want to thank you so much for listening.
Wow.
Princeton community historian and activist Shirley Ann Satterfield is the fourth of 6 generations of the Van Zandt, Moore, and May family in Princeton. She was educated in Princeton schools during the segregated years. She is a graduate of Bennett College for Women with a degree in elementary education. She's a lifelong member of Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church. Her passion is keeping the history of her church and the history of Princeton African American community. Mrs. Satterfield has walked with Albert Einstein and knew Paul Robeson. She walked hand in hand with her grandmother to care for people in Princeton, in the Princeton community. She's an activist and historian. She cares for people as she walked with her grandmother in the community and experienced the racial transition of the quality and equality of education in Princeton. Mrs. Satterfield was instrumental in the Witherspoon-Jackson community being designated as the 20th historic district in Princeton. Shirley is now the president of the Witherspoon-Jackson Historical and Cultural Society and continues to be a positive force in the Princeton community. Mrs. Satterfield's talk is Born Colored, Personal Experiences of Growing Up in a Segregated Princeton. Mrs. Satterfield.
Because at the last minute I said, Karen, would you please come up and be a partner and talk about our church? So thank you, Catherine. You're welcome. Yes. Okay. A colored baby was born in the Osteopathic Hospital of Philadelphia to Claude Wayne Satterfield of Philadelphia and Alice Wilson May Satterfield of Princeton, New Jersey. Go back, I want to notice the feet. I asked my mother, why is it I was born in the osteopathic hospital? She said, because that was a hospital they could get her to fast enough because I was coming too fast. My mother returned to Princeton soon after I was born, and my journey began as a 4th generation of the Van Zandt Moore-May family. My early life started on Old Clay Street,
in the segregated town of Princeton, New Jersey. Racism, segregation, Jim Crowism was all around us. Our community, our churches, our schools, our YWCA, even the Princeton Cemetery was prefaced with the word colored. There were no phrases such as eliminating racism, Black Lives Matter, racial literacy, or multicultural, but we did know the word freedom. And through our churches, schools, and fraternal organizations, our families, in spite of rejection, alienation, and disrespect, quietly fought for centuries for racial and social justice. Since the early 1700s, through their blood, sweat, and faith, they survived and sustained every aspect of Princeton. My young years were protected by my mother, grandmother, and all my aunts and uncles. Protected because I was sheltered from the ugliness of segregation by living in a caring, nurturing neighborhood. I remember the special times, playing jacks, pick up sticks, hide and seek with my friends, while our parents sat on their porches in quiet conversation. Playing around the ice plant until someone told me that the devil lived in the ice plant. And taking a spoon and digging in the dirt because someone said, if you dig far enough, you'll get to China. So much fun and innocence. Growing up in a community where many homes were candy stores and ice cream parlors, there were grocery stores, beauty salons, barbershops, taverns, and fraternal organizations. The realization that we were not welcomed in stores and restaurants on Nassau Street was not known to me until the schools in the borough of Princeton were integrated. Leaving our segregated school meant leaving caring colored teachers, losing excellent academic instruction, learning about heritage and culture, and now feeling the stings of racism. I consider the integration of the elementary schools in 1948 as forced integration because there were no workshops or meetings with teachers to prepare them for the addition of colored children in their classrooms. The public schools in Princeton, New Jersey had educated white, colored, Negro, Black, and African American students in the same schools since 1948. Our schools now educate students of many ethnic backgrounds. The question for today, is the education level of all students equal, and has the integration of the schools made a positive and successful difference in the academic progress of African American students? When the schools were integrated, our colored school became the junior high school, and all students in the borough of Princeton went to that school. We still had our colored YWCA, but why a colored Y? During the summer of 1917, the Women's League for Patriotic Service gave their support to form the Girls' Patriotic League. With the assistance of approximately 10 members of the Women's League, enough money was raised to rent an apartment in the Bickford building on Nassau Street to provide a meeting place for the girls. The women contacted the National Board of the United Young Women's Christian Association for assistance and guidance for the Girls' League. The Women's League partnered with the Mercer County YWCA until 1921, when there was a plan for the reorganization of the Princeton Center into a town association. With a successful transition, a charter was given for the National Board of the YWCA, and on January 4th, 1922, the Princeton YWCA began. With the development of the Girls' Patriotic League through the beginning of the Princeton YWCA, the Negro women and girls were not welcomed or invited to participate in events and activities. In 1919, a special committee was formed to address this exclusion. With the obvious awareness of the total segregation of Negro population, a group of approximately 15 Negro girls met in a building on the grounds of Mount Pisgah AME Church to begin their own club. From 1919 to 1939, the colored YWCA had grown through several dedicated Y secretaries. On December 1939, the colored YWCA moved to, and I quote, a beautiful structure on Green Street. In 1940, the Y became known as the Witherspoon branch of the YWCA. For 9 years, there were meetings, discussions, and recommendations to integrate the two Ys. However, a conclusion was drawn from the Princeton Association that a local YWCA seeking to eliminate the barriers which separate groups from each other should proceed step by step, but should not hesitate to take the next step. All groups should be on the ground floor, especially where changes are contemplated. Above all, if the understanding necessary to progress toward an integrated YWCA is to be achieved, and the leadership of the organization, both white and Negro, must be thoroughly committed to the principle of integration, and must possess an unswerving confidence in each other, which will endure through the problems, misunderstandings, and disappointments which inevitably occur during the process of trying to improve human relations anywhere, anytime. I finally remember during my teenage years attending religious events shared by our churches, our club member meetings. I was the secretary of the Darlettes and enjoyed dancing and community events at the Colored Y. Other than our churches and fraternal organizations, the Witherspoon YWCA was the center of our community. Having reconciled after about 40 years of negotiations, the two YWCA locations became one when this building was erected on Avalon Estate, and a Negro woman, Mrs. Susie Brown Waxwood, became the executive director of the Y from 1958 to 1968. Today, the Princeton YWCA has made concerted and determined efforts to bring eliminating racism to reality. The Stand Against Racism is a yearly event whose purpose is to bring community together to enhance the racial and to bring awareness of the negative effects of racism. The next question. Since 2007, how successful has the Standing Against Racism become to meet its purpose and hope? This once colored girl who lived through and felt the injustices put upon our families in a segregated Princeton is now an African American woman who has tried to bring awareness and understanding to a town where her family has been a positive presence for 6 generations. 2 thoughts that I leave you to ponder with. 1948, the integration of the public schools in Princeton. 1958, 10 years later, a Negro woman, Mrs. Susie Brown Waxwood, was the first executive director for 10 years of this Y. Now, 2018, we gather here for thought-provoking talks about social justice. I trust that all of us present today will stand. We will stand for the struggle of equality, understanding, reconciliation, truth, transformation, and peace. Thank you.